All right, guys, section 10.4, imperialism, a big word, another ism, yet another one for you to tackle and chew on and think about. It is a term that in World Civ, for perspective, we have a whole unit on. But of course, this is AP Euro, and we're flying at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and for us, it's only a section. So again, this is going to be a little bit longer of a section again. So I will not waste time. Here's the menu, and let's go. So first of all, what is imperialism? It is the extension of a nation's authority over nations or areas through conquest and political and economic control. It is similar to colonization, where you're going to go in and conquer a place, but it's not so much exploring as colonization. It's more of the complete takeover of an area and then the exploitation of that area for your either political or economic benefit. So we're going to think of it a little bit differently than we did the Christopher Columbus era. I'm really like laid back on this bed. I need to get comfy. I'm sorry about my 7 chins. I'm going to just do this so that you can't see the excess like chin flying at you. I know you don't want to see that. Okay, maybe I open my hoodie up like this. Okay, so anyway, let's just establish the differences between the old colonization and this new imperialism that we're going to talk about. So first of all, the motivations for colonization. Well, I mean, if you think about that, the 3 G's is the easy answer. Think about the search for new trade routes, because the Mediterranean, the Italian monopoly, and the Renaissance era, and countries are looking for new ways to get to the Far East to trade. So that is, it's very driven economic. It's also very religious in the sense of trying to spread Catholic ideology, particularly during the 1500s and the counter-Catholic Reformation. Now, at first, colonization was only coastal settlements. Remember the Portuguese, when they would go around the Horn of Africa, they would only do the little pit stop colonization, where they basically settled the coast and then they'd move along their way. We see later, obviously, Portugal, even with Brazil, Spain, the Netherlands, we see these countries, and then we get France as well, once they're looking to more of a full-on settlement and colonization rather than just a coastal settlement. So the dominant countries, the 3 that are unique to the period, Portugal, especially at first, the Spanish, absolutely, and then the Dutch, right, because of the economic growth that they were able to increase and have. New imperialism is, and then there's, of course, Christopher Columbus. New imperialism, the motivations are going to be different. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And then it's not going to be looking for a new trade route. It's going to be because of more of the economic situations and also cultural situations in Europe at the time as we go into the late 1800s. It is based more off the complete dominance of society. We'll see that. And the 3 really leaders of this movement, England and France for certain, and then also we're going to throw Belgium in there. Belgium, a recently independent country in the year 1832, is going to throw their weight into imperialism, and this is one of their kings, King Leopold II, who's going to be remembered for such things. So again, the difference is it's not based on trying to create and find new trade routes. It's not even necessarily built on a religious motivation with the Catholic Church's desire to go out and spread ideas. And it's not a coastal or superfluous colonization. It is a complete dominance. We're going to see that. Now, first of all, the causes, and this is a very, very important section, is why does imperialism happen in the late 19th century? Well, let's start with the money, because I think that's what the root issue of it is. First of all, it is the search for new markets and raw materials. Now, you've got to understand what role the Industrial Revolution plays in this, right? The Industrial Revolution happens, you make all these goods, right? And you're looking for people to sell them to. So say I make pillows, right? This is a very comfy pillow. I'm going to put my head back on it. This is very comfortable. The idea here is that I'm going to run out of people who can buy pillows. So I've got to look for new markets. Well, the great thing is imperialism gives you a way to conquer an area and then make those people buy your stuff. Additionally, this pillow is also made of the finest feathers in the land. But guess what? Eventually you run out of birds to get the feathers from. So you got to find a place that has more feathers. That's where you hit up imperialism, is you go out, conquer a place, and then take all their stuff, right? And thus you can continue to feed the industrial machine. So again, let me go ahead and write it on here. Make sure you know the industrial revolution is so important here because it serves as the impetus for needing new markets to sell and raw materials to produce. And hey, look at that. It's like I know what's coming. It's amazing. And again, here we are. I mean, it's basically writing it down for you. That's basically it. So here are some of, if you see here below, we have 3 products that are going to become, 3 products that are going to become hot ticket items coming out of the age of imperialism. You have ivory tusk here from the elephants, right? You have here diamonds, of course, they're forever, right? And then right here you have rubber. It's liquid rubber coming out of a rubber tree, and we'll talk about why those are needed here in a moment. All right, so we do have some religious elements going on. There is a strong religious revival in Europe in the 19th century. You might kind of connect that as anti-enlightenment. It's kind of a pro-romanticism type emotional connection as the church looks to rebuild. It's in America, it's called the first, or not the first, but it's called the Great Awakening. So you'll hear that next year in U.S. history. So there's a huge religious revival, and the idea is that we need to go out and spread our religious doctrines. So I am on fire today. It is a response to the rationalism of the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment, which was not very kind to organized religion, it was certainly more logically based. The growth of deism, of course, de-Christianization in the French Revolution. In the 19th century, you see kind of a reaction to that, as saying, you know what, God is still quite alive, and we need to support and to promote Christian ideas and spread those across the world. You also have some political causes. Countries, and this is kind of common sense, right? Countries looking to build new bases to protect their interests against other countries. Military advantage, if you build like a naval base in a certain area, you certainly have control of that area. So this is a big one as well, not to be ignored, even though we're going to support probably most of the time the economic and the cultural. This is certainly an important thing as well. It's like countries looking to kind of moderate the balance of power, because with the unifications of Germany and Italy, it's totally changed it. So now countries looking to get kind of a leg up on others by having access to other areas of the world. Now, cultural. This is, I think, probably the most, the economic, I think, is the most important. I think cultural is second. I think cultural is also going to give the people who are doing the economic kind of some justification for what they're doing. There's 2 different ideas at play here. One is called social Darwinism. Now, next unit, we're going to talk about the growth of Darwinism and kind of the belief in the supremacy of the natural world. And Darwin's ideas is that the strongest survive, right? You know that from biology. Social Darwinism was basically a play on that idea, saying that the strongest society survives. So if we as a people, as our country, if we are not out conquering and growing and looking to expand, then we're going to get eaten up. So we need to go out and get it on, basically. And that's what social Darwinism is. And the guy's name to know here is Herbert. I'm just going to write the H, but his name is Herbert Spencer. Okay, Herbert Spencer. He's the one that really coins the term social Darwinism, builds the idea. This is not a Darwinian. It's not Charles Darwin who comes up with the survival of the fittest of societies. This is more of Herbert Spencer's cup of tea. The second thing, a popular belief in the period, and we'll see this in class, was a belief called the white man's burden. And this was popularized from a poem by Rudyard Kipling, the guy who wrote the Jungle Book. And the idea is that the responsibility to care for the less fortunate, the less civilized, the the societies that did not have industrialization or the Enlightenment or organized religion or all these things, it was the duty of the white European man to basically go out and care for those people. So you see this man here, to bring the African man or the Asian man or the Polynesian man, to bring them up to, as you see here, the schoolhouse. So here's Madison Central here on the top of the hill, and it's the white man who's bringing the African or the Asian man or whatever up to the schoolhouse. So again, it's kind of justification at the time. Yes, overtly racist, but it's the justification at the time that Europe should not sit on their hands, but go out and use their immense power for good, and to bring these people, running water, indoor plumbing, these kind of improvements that we're actually going to talk about in Unit 11 that make European standard of living better, without a doubt, right, objectively, and it was the responsibility to go out and take that to these other societies. So, combination of all these causes build the case for imperialism, okay? And with that in mind, I love it, right? Look at the lights here. I mean, look at Simba, and then he flies down that way, and then Rafiki is really sad. I mean, it's a very sad thing. Okay, this looks like a person's face. Look at this. I'm gonna put a little hair on him right here. Like, here's a little ear. I'm gonna put the eyes, little glasses action. I'm gonna build a little nose, maybe a smile, teeth. Look at that. I am an artist. This is awesome. Right? I wish someone was here to see it. Maisie's asleep. I watched that Meyer. I don't know. Piper, come here. Piper, come here. Come here. Piper, come look. I'm an artist. Look at that. Look at that. Piper, look at my drawing. I know you're impressed, right? Okay, back to this. I'm wasting your time. All right. So let's go to Africa. And this is probably the best case study, I think, for the impact of imperialism. But before we conquer Africa through Europe, the question is, how do you do it? Surely you would have done this beforehand, right? But there's certain things that have happened that allow conquering a lot easier. So let's go through it real quick. Okay, first of all, step one, metal weapons. We have this new development, breech loading rifle, which means that instead of having to put one shell in to a musket and fire and reload, now you can reload where you put the gunpowder in, push the shell down, and now you can hold the gun, put the shell in the back, and bam, fire it that way. We're not talking automatic weapons here, and like that, but it's just you don't have to put the shell in and the powder and then push it in, watch Civil War movies or things like that. Revolutionary War, you'll see that. So the better guns allow for better control. There you go. There's a breech loading rifle. Step 2, be able to communicate and travel. Railroads, telegraph lines, steamboats. All these things allow Europeans to sail upriver, establish communication methods, and then move goods around. So it's a key thing in terms of not only conquering, but also keeping control, which sometimes is underrated. Step 3 is stay healthy. New drugs, new medicine to help you tackle African and Southeast Asian illnesses like malaria, which those little skeeters give you, right? They bite you on the arm and you have malaria and you die. But you don't want that. You want quinine, which was a new drug allowing Europeans to go into these places and stay and handle sicknesses that might develop, right? Sometimes the sicknesses would get them. So, step 1, step 2, step 3. All these things help Europeans stay, not only conquer, but stay in power. All right, so Africa. Once we discover that Europeans have the means to conquer, now everybody's going to want peace, right? Because of the causes we talked about. So we have a period called the Scramble for Africa, which starts in about 1880. Okay, so European countries rushing to claim territory in Africa. In 1880, Europe owned about 10% or controlled 10% of the continent. By 1910, we're talking all of Europe, except for a little piece here. I think it's here. Liberia, it might be over here. It's one of those two. And then Ethiopia, which is over on this side. Everything else was under European control. What's the effect on Africa? It improves life by Western standards, right? So if we're judging by Western standards, It certainly improves life, but it also showed an incredible disregard for traditional alliances and rivalries and really African culture in a nutshell. We're going to see that in a minute because every country is looking to get a piece. So the question is, how do you get a piece? How do you share, right? Because you don't just throw it, everyone rushes in. So you have a peace conference before the hypothetical war starts over different areas. And it's called the Berlin Conference. And if you took AP Human Geography, you'll be familiar with this. Oh, and by the way, it's in Berlin, so look who's in charge. My man. All right, so this guy the conference establishes the rules for conquest of Africa to decrease European rivalries. The idea is that if you split up Africa at the beginning, then you won't have future battles over like the lines of who's going to have it. So the idea is that no country can claim a territory unless you can control it. So you can't go and just party and then leave. The idea is that you have to go in and be able to hold that territory if you're going to claim it. African leaders are not invited to the conference, which is dumb and stupid, as we're going to see here in a minute. Because, again, this is just the arrogance, right, and the ethnocentrism of Europeans here to decide, you know what, we're not going to even care about the needs and wishes of the African people. We're just going to go in and they'll just deal with it, right? It's the idea that even those rivalries and alliances that existed in Africa were just inferior to the Europeans. And they didn't even need to hear it, like the perspective of Africans who, granted, would not be able to defend themselves here, but perhaps could have been listened to as we look at what happened. So this is a graphic which shows you kind of like traditional nations of the African continent. And you see, like, it's a very rough outline because there weren't any, like, technically, like, there's no, like, technical, like, lines that already existed. But let me show you how, like, after you have this kind of informal map, let me show you how the European countries settled this. Okay, so now we have, you see France up here, and then you have a lot of British possessions here, and then you have a little random other pieces. But anyway, like, take a look here. So, like, what I circled there, I know the map's a little different, but look at this. I circled this area right here, right? Let's just take a look in there. And then now we're in the countries of Uganda, and the Congo, and Kenya, and Sudan. And I think it's important to know is that these are different nations, right? These are different, like, in essence, countries, people groups, customs, cultures. And they're being grouped into these singular nation states that the Europeans are going to control. So I think it's interesting, worth knowing is that when perhaps we think about Africa today and the war and strife that is in the country or in the continent, and some of that is a leftover from this decision, geopolitical decision of drawing the lines on Africa, irrespective of the dynamics that already existed there. Again, this is the Berlin Conference. Now, one of those countries that come into Africa is Belgium. And Belgium has its own colony in what's known today as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I think that's what it's called. I really should know that. It was also called Zaire for a long time, but it's known as the Congo at this point. This actually is not even a colony that Belgium owns. This is controlled by the royalty in Belgium. So it's like the king has his own colony. It's like, if Trump owned Wyoming or something. Wyoming, what else do they have? So anyway, we get a lot of hate mail from people in Wyoming. So the King Leopold sets up his own colony in the Congo, and he basically wants to exploit the rubber trade. And rubber, of course, we know it, tires mostly. Basically, the tire, like tires don't grow on trees, right? You don't like go pick it and be like, oh, a good year. You don't do that. You take this sap that comes out of the trees, of these rubber trees, and then intense heat vulcanization is the process. And you create rubber. Now, around the time of this imperialism, we have the development of bicycles, we have the development of automobiles, things that need tires, right? So, Leopold II sees a lot of money possibly in this business. And over the 30-year stretch, the Congo's population drops in half, from 20 to 10 million. And an insane amount, 10 million people over 30 years. To give that some context, the Holocaust, 12 million people over 12, right? Or 11 over 12, or something like that. We will look more at this in class and discuss the Belgian Congo a little bit more history behind it. But it is an example of the economic motivations for imperialism running amok. Something to keep in mind. Let's take a look now at what the British do specifically. One thing I wanted you to notice here from this map is that the British are able to, if you notice here, control a lot of that eastern part of Africa. It's not only Africa that the British grow into. By the 1920s, the British Empire basically is all the way over the world. And the British had been able to, through their superior navy and their most superior economy, fueled by the Industrial Revolution, had basically created a world empire. And in fact, there was a phrase that says that the sun never set on the British Empire, meaning that you could be anywhere in the world at any time, and you be anywhere in the world. Let me rephrase. You be anywhere in the world and be on a British. There'd be a British colony basically that the sun would be shining on. Okay, the sun never set. So all over the world where Britain existed at this point, you could see the sun. So this is a graphic that kind of illustrates that. And you see as we go around into the Pacific here, or the Atlantic, and then the Pacific down in the bottom part, and then up in Australia and India and into Africa, is that the sun was always shining on England. And consequently, England's financial dominance is the 19th century. And that cultural dominance spreads and exists even to this day. If you think of why English is such a pervasive language across the world, it's because the British Empire spread so far and went so many places, including my favorite island, Christmas Island. Sign me up, let me go and visit Santa. Okay, who knew Santa was British, right? I mean, that's just fun. So the sun never sets on that British Empire. Now, one place that Britain did control was Egypt. Okay, and the decision is made by the Egyptians in the mid-1800s to create a canal that would connect the Mediterranean Sea, which is up here, with the Red Sea, and that would take you, and that would take you down to the Indian Ocean, right? Well, the Portuguese would have loved this back in the day. However, during that construction of the canal, Egypt went into debt and basically went into bankruptcy and could not pay back their loans in building the canal, which led the British to come in and basically buy up a lot of shares and take control of the construction of the canal. And by doing so, we know the significance I just told you, and by doing so, would be able to oversee the final construction of the canal. That meant that the British could charge anyone they wanted to go through the canal. But again, you're like, this is in Egypt. That doesn't really make much sense. Well, it doesn't matter because the British supplied the money to be able to finish the construction of the canal. So while you think, well, Egypt wasn't really a colony of England, or the British, rather, which it really wasn't, at the same time, England controlled Egypt through economic imperialism. So, like, political... My thing is... Why are you not working? It's not really working very well. Okay, so, like, political imperialism, you, like, control someone, right? You go in and you directly colonize them and, like, rule. Economic imperialism basically means that your... footprint is there because a lot of the business that happens in the country, even though that country still rules themselves, your money is going to that mother country, right? So England is able to develop that economic imperialism here. And from that, England sought, because of the Suez Canal for one, and then other places, they sought to in Africa to have this dream where they would connect North to South Africa by one railroad line. It was led by this man named Cecil Rhodes, the Cape to Cairo dream, right? Cape of Good Horn is down here. and Cairo, of course, the capital of Egypt. The dream was never completed, but in this illustration, you've got Cecil Rhodes, who is a railroad titan, stretching telegraph lines from Cairo all the way to South Africa. So the idea is that this is basically here, this continent is here for England's well-being. And Cecil Rhodes is one of the men who tried to make that happen. Now, let's look at another British colony here real quick. This is India, right? You know India. It was known as the jewel of the crown, the most valuable of all of England's colonies. It, likewise, I talked to you about economic imperialism. It was basically a protectorate. So it's a colony that was ruled not by the British government, but by the British East India Company, which had been established about 200 years ago. In India, that colony had been developed since basically the 1600s as a vassal for the British economic system. So this is like, again, it's a company basically with a colony. Imagine like Walmart goes out and conquers Jackson County. I mean, we're all waiting for it to happen. And that's basically what this is. And it kind of existed that way. Well, time goes by, and eventually, though, the Indians are like, you know what, we kind of don't like this. And in the year 1857, there is a revolt. It's called the Sepoy Mutiny. It is motivated by these men named Sepoys, who are Indians serving in the British colonial army. So the British East India Company basically has a wing of the British Army, which is there, and it's made up of native Indians who serve as basically to police their own people. Right, because the British are there kind of driving the economic engine, and the Sepoys kind of help with that because, you know, it'd be kind of tougher if you had British troops there punching everybody in the face. It kind of goes easier. The people who punch you in the face look like it, right? I mean, that's just basically the way it would go. Well, this mutiny is motivated because the new rifle cartridges that the Sepoys had to use were greased in pig fat. And you were like, well, who cares about that? Well, you had to like chew it to open it up so like you could get the powder to go into the gun or the rifle cartridge, right? So you'd have to like bite it off. And the part you bite was greased in pig fat, and you're like, well, still, it sounds good, right? Give me some bacon grease. But remember that many of these Indian soldiers are Hindu and Muslim. You can't eat pork, right? That's a no-no in those two faiths. So basically, this leads to an insurrection against the British East India Company. And you have to have more soldiers come in, and it's a big, insurrection, big trouble. But eventually it is put down, and after that, the Indian people are now going to be ruled directly by the British government. Again, this is the year 1857. Now, that system's going to last for about another 90 years until you get a guy named Gandhi who rises up, and we'll see that story later. But this is kind of the foundation of the escalation of the British people, rather the Indian people, starting to have a little rumblings of, you know what, we kind of don't like the presence of the British here. And there are other instances of these rise in kind of protests against European occupation. Probably the best examples in China. It's called the Boxer Rebellion, okay, which we may take a little bit of time in class to review a little and learn about a little bit and how significant that was, because it's kind of a similar story to the Sepoy Mutiny of a failed revolt to get European powers out of the way. Now, the last thing to look at as we close up here is imperialism itself. Is it a positive or is it a negative thing? And, of course, a lot of it depends on your perspective, but we see here on the left side a photograph or a painting, one of the two, I think it was a painting, of this man kissing his friend. I don't know, are they married? Who knows? She's clear. I mean, look at her, like her eyes are open. It's kind of weird. But anyway, it's this emotional, romantic moment of going off to fight and conquer for your mother country, right? But at the same time, we look at this painting on the other side by a Frenchman named Paul Gauguin. and it shows the European here basically preying on these two native women, Polynesian women. Gives you an idea of kind of from different perspectives. And if you notice, if you look at his toes, right, what those look like, and maybe his hair kind of looks of that too on the side. All perspectives, right, of how imperialism was a reaction. This style of art, which is developed, is called primitivism. So it is it's something to look at as well. And another reaction was a man named J.A. Hobson, and he writes that imperialism is a great ill. It's a great, we don't really like it. And he argues that it's only helping the wealthy in the conquering countries. Again, where's that money coming back? It's coming back to the industrialists. It's coming back to the government. And he's saying that it's doing nothing but increasing the gap in between the two. And J.L. Hobson says, here's how you end it. You raise your workers' wages, right? So you raise workers' wages and you give them more purchasing power in the economy. Here's the deal. If you raise your workers' wages, then workers can consume more goods, right? We have the money to buy more, and then he argues that takes away the need for more markets. And again, it's such economic motivations for this imperialism. So that's J.A. Hobson's argument. It doesn't really work, right? It's not really followed, but it's something to keep in mind. So it's a long-winded imperialism. There's a lot there. Like I said, I do this in a whole unit, a world civ, but for the euro, it's one section. So we have to be that. I do not want to keep info annotations. But in any case, no generally, the causes, kind of a picture of the scramble of Africa and the British Empire, and then maybe some responses to imperialism as well, things that we'll explore in more depth in class. So I'll get out of here. You've done well with all this time. So bye-bye.